Okay, so we're recording the class as usual. Good afternoon, everyone. This is me again, Dr. Samah, and this is A100A, and we have reached the final stage of the course where we're doing Ireland, or the Invention of Tradition, and this happens to be the last chapter. Very interesting in terms of the ideas that we have. Very interesting in terms of the also the affinities that you're going to kind of establish with Ireland and the cause of Ireland, given the fact that at one point most of us, or our countries rather, were under colonial empires in one way or another. If you come from I come from Egypt, and it has a long history of colonization where it was actually it changed hands. I mean, we had different colonial powers. We had the French, we had the English, and I don't know who else. If you come from from India or Pakistan, you also had or have your share of colonial rule. At one point, you guys were under British occupation and British Empire. So we also have other people who were also under occupation by the French, for example, by the Dutch. So this makes it very relatable in the sense that you're going to identify with the Irish in their fight for independence. So you're going to find the material very interesting. Like all the other chapters and like all the other pieces of material that we have taken, we're not interested in history. We're not interested in the facts on the ground and whether those facts are correct or wrong. We're interested in developing English major skills, the skill of sorting primary sources from secondary sources, challenging sources and not taking them for granted. Using your mental powers in order to judge whether what is being presented is accurate or not. Knowing how to read material, heavy-handed material in a limited time, given the fact that we're not normally at our leisure when it comes to perhaps exams and assessments and even reading. Time is very limited. So knowing how to negotiate your way through material that is heavy-handed within or under time constraints is a big skill that you guys need to develop here and also in the other courses. So last time it was poetry, and I think we enjoyed the ride. We spoke about different poets, and we have seen how different they are in their reaction to an engagement with tradition. Some of them were traditional to the core, and some of them were very dissenting and very transgressive. Transgressive means that they were challenging the established poetic practices, and on top of them is of course D.H. Lawrence. So we still have this idea overall or arching theme or idea of tradition versus dissent. We're doing that, but this time around it's not poetry, it's not painting, it's not philosophy. This time around it's history. We're going to see how history can be manipulated and tampered with to kind of meet certain expectations and to serve certain purposes. Um, Again, the history that we're doing is the colonial history of Ireland, and how the Irish fought for their independence, which of course they got in 1921 or 1922. It has been a long struggle for freedom and for independence, and of course independence of Britain or the British Empire. The British had been in Ireland for centuries and centuries, and obviously, as occupying forces, they were not giving the Irish what they deserve in terms of freedoms, in terms of privileges, in terms of decent living conditions, and this is of course typical of occupiers, always and everywhere. So let me go straight to the chapter, and we can continue the effort and talk more about it. So this is the chapter. So it's Ireland that we're doing, and the title is, the whole title is obviously Ireland, the Invention of Tradition. And then we have a number of ideas that the chapter is going to address. One of them would be history and tradition. The invention of tradition will talk about Irish nationalism, whether this nationalism is political or cultural. We're going to talk about a turning point in the history of Ireland, which is the Easter Rising or Uprising of 1916. This happens to be very monumental. Ireland after 1916 is not the Ireland of before 1916. There is a big gap and there is a big difference. We'll talk more about what happened after Easter 1916. We'll talk about heritage and the heritage of Ireland and what it is made of and its different manifestations. And again, the wheel will come full circle, and we talk about tradition and descent and the invention of tradition. In order to do all of that, we're going to have as examples some primary sources, documents from the period, proclamations of independence and poems and all these kinds of things. They are also meant to give us, deeper looks into the context, the Irish context at the time. So when I say Ireland, so does the word ring any bells at the back of your mind? Ireland. So together with the fact that it is a country, what else do you know about Ireland? Together with the fact that it is in where? It is in Europe. So together with the fact that it is a country, yeah, go ahead, yeah, Fatma, I was joking. Go ahead.
I just know a few facts about it, about
Yeah,
general facts. It's
yes,
also known as the Emerald Isle. Um, it was part of English rule until it separated,
yeah.
and it had a a history of a lot of troubles and invasions.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's basically Britain. So Britain was all over the place. They obviously didn't have any issues with any other country. It's this imposing presence of the British. The British had been there for hundreds of years, and they didn't want to let go. Eventually, they will let go. Um, yeah, so that's why Ireland is always whenever people talk about Ireland, they talk about the English and the British and this long-standing association between the two. Any other ideas about
Sorry, I
Ireland?
just had something to add.
Yeah,
I do know that they used to speak. I don't know if it's still spoken or not. The Gaelic. language,
Yes, yeah,
and it has a lot of mythological creatures
yes,
in myth.
that's true. Actually, this is, you know, they, it's a language that nobody speaks, obviously, but they, because of this color, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm not going to pronounce it. I'm trying to say that the English did everything they did, everything in their power in order to obliterate and delete English, Irish culture and Irish language. Of course, you know that the language is part of the culture. So as a kind of, the Irish wanted some fuel. They wanted at one point to tell people that we are not, we had our own history, and our history is as glorious as that of the British. We once had our own language, we once had our own history and our own kings, and we once were the seat of early Christianity. So they turned to Gaelic, which is obviously their native tongue before the advent of the English or the British. And they were very successful in restoring the language. It's of course it's I don't want to be judgmental and say it's a difficult kind of language. Uh, but they do use it in Ireland. Again, it's a source of pride. They are trying to impress on everybody that we had our own history and our own language and everything. Thank you, Fatma, for this very interesting piece of information about the Gaelic or Gaelic language for that matter. So it's Ireland that we're talking about. Like I said, whenever we talk about Ireland, we talk about the British rule in Ireland and how close the two countries are. Close physically and geographically, and also close in terms of history. The fact that the British were ruling Ireland for hundreds of years. Okay. They stayed, the British stayed in Ireland for hundreds of years, and they managed at one point to kind of obliterate and delete the culture of the Irish. When you go to Ireland now, people speak English. This is obviously the official language, the language of communication and everything. But there did exist a language that we call Gaelic, like Fatma said. But as a result of hundreds of years of trying to cancel the Irish culture, it's only natural that people got influenced by Britain and its the way of life of the British and their language and their English and all these kinds. Again, um, towards the perhaps the mid and the late 18th century, there is going to be this upsurge or revival of interest in the Irish cause. The Irish are going to stop for a while and say, listen, those guys have been, there dominating us for hundreds of years. Why don't we ask for self-rule? And it all started with self-rule. They didn't want complete independence. And well, this is very ironic. When the Irish started asking for rights, they wanted only home government. They wanted self-rule. They would say, okay, so we're going to stay under the British Empire and everything, but we need self-government. We need to rule ourselves. Is that asking too much? And obviously, it was asking too much for the British, and the British wouldn't relent. So much so that the Irish started to ask for more. I ask you for something as little as home government for myself to rule myself, and then you refuse, okay? And then I start to demand more rights, and this is how it ended. Instead of, or rather than having home government or self-rule, they had complete independence. This is our story tonight or today, inshallah. Right. Please mute your mic.
Can I add something? Greeting.
Yeah, add something, Muhammad Hassan.
لا لا I'm Fatma, but I'm joining by my brother's team
Ah,
account.
it's okay. Are you Fatma, my
Yes,
friend?
yes, yes, yes,
From the
Fatma.
IT department, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, go
Okay,
ahead.
so greeting everyone. I was about to add something also about Ireland and about its history and the civilization, not the civilization, the colonization and everything. And I would actually like to connect it with literature because there is a Gothic writer or an author. He's in Ireland. His name is Patrick McCabe. He was writing a novel that won the best novel, the best short novel in 1919. It was mainly about Ireland and the struggle of their nation as the constant war between tradition and modernism, and they're trying to fight to establish their kind of identity and their kind of fight to make sure that their history and their civilization is not forgotten. And the story is quite interesting because it also considered quite gothic. Like there's like elements of like dead bodies or like very dark materials and violence and like a killing and like lots of symbolism. But that's very also interesting because Fatma just said something about their old language, and that could actually also be represented in that novel. That when Patrick used like elements of ancient like مثل الروميات that was
Yeah,
found
I
in
mean they have the. I mean يعني let me just congratulate you on your performance. Yeah, and by the way, Fatma is
thank
IT,
you.
not English. Can you imagine?
Yes.
Fatma belongs to the IT department, not to the English department. See how
Thank you.
knowledgeable about literature people can be. You don't have to be English major in order to know about this and that. Thank you, Fatma. Let me just
You're
pick
welcome.
up what from what you have been saying.
That's good.
Perhaps the Gothic elements that you have seen in the novel that you have mentioned have to do with mythology, and Irish literature is all about restoring the mythology, because the Irish were known for their they have mythology that is as big and as good as Greek mythology, ancient Egyptian mythology, and this was, like I was saying, was a source of pride for them. They made sure that their works of art, whether literature or non-literature, expressed that. They wanted to tell everybody that Ireland is big, that it is as ancient as any other country, perhaps older than the English themselves. So this was the fuel, the national fuel that they wanted, so that they can propel and push forward their cause for independence. We'll talk more about that in a minute, inshallah.
Thank you so much,
Uh,
Doctor.
you're welcome, Fatma. Again, I was talking about Ireland and the associations of Ireland, and like I said, associations are whatever a word or a concept triggers at the back of your mind when it is dropped or mentioned. Again, if you ask me about the associations of Ireland, I would talk about this long colonial history, this long record of exploitation on the part of the British. I would talk about Irish mythology. I'll talk about the division that the and the rifts that the English managed to cause within the national fabric of Ireland, the fact that we end up having two islands, as a matter of fact. We have an island on the right, and I'm sorry, in the north, and you have the rest of Ireland. You have with the coming of the British, you will also have two different Christian denominations. You would have the Protestants in the north, and you would have the Catholics, occupying the rest of the Irish map. Of course, the Catholics are or were, they have always been the majority, and the Anglicans or the Protestants, like I said, are a small minority. We'll talk about this division and this rift caused by the British, typical of occupiers, of course. We'll talk about how the Irish are going to claim their independence and what steps they would take in order to eventually have this long-awaited for independence. Again, so history and tradition. So we have tradition. So obviously, it's not poetic tradition after. It's not artistic tradition that we're after. It's not philosophical tradition or poetic tradition. It's here we're talking about history. And like I said, the starting point would be whether tradition is going to be kind of tampered with and messed with so that it can serve purposes or not. I need to also, right from the very beginning, forewarn you and alert you to the fact that obviously the book or the chapter is written by a staunch British individual who sees, and this is this is what is going to transpire. I've been teaching the course for quite some time, and I have sensed that there is this sense of we're not. I don't see the writer of the chapter very honest in his portrayal and representation of the struggle of the Irish. He thinks that it is a struggle for independence and something else, as we're going to see. To the extent that he is referring to the Irish tradition as invention, as if the Irish are or have been trying to invent. So when you invent something, it means that you bring in something from scratch. You make something from scratch, which is obviously an indirect way of saying that the Irish didn't have history or didn't have tradition and culture, and they had to kind of invent that so that they can have people encouraged to be part of their movement for independence. Anyway, remember, we need not to overlook the fact that this is English major and this is not history. And if we have history, this is the battleground, if you like, upon which we have ideas fighting against each other. So it's history that we're having as the material that can help us develop English major skills. So what are the English major skills that we're going to develop together? It would be the idea of knowing how to read historical material, again, how to kind of sort the wheat from the chaff, if you like, how to sort out primary sources from their secondary sources counterparts, how not to take for granted what other people say, whether what they say is history or literature or any other, aspect of life in this case. Okay, طيب. I will stop for a moment or for a minute where I'm asking you to, you guys have your mobiles handy. I would like you to Google the map of Ireland and make sure that the map had or has Britain. I would like you, and I could have given you the map, but I would like you to look it up yourself. I would like you to look at the political map of Ireland and come back to me. I would like you to perhaps count how many counties we have. Again, I would like you to look at where Ireland is situated in relation to Britain. Is it to the south? Is it to the north? Is it to the east? Is it to the... So come up with ideas when you look closely at the map. I'll give you a minute for that because it's very handy. I mean, just write Ireland or the political map of Ireland and see what you will get. I'll do the same thing. Oh. Any luck? Hmm.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
Ireland is northwest, I think, northwest from Europe.
Is in the north of Europe,
Northwest
right?
of the Europe. Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I was there in Ireland before.
You, mashallah, you went to Ireland.
Yeah, I lived there for a year.
You lived there for 4 years, mashallah, and that you were doing what, the ambassador or something?
My husband was studying.
Yeah,
Yes,
interesting. Yeah. So what do you have to say about Ireland?
yes,
Did you
yeah,
like it?
yeah, very much. Ireland is above on the water. Have a water every side, and there was a river in the island.
But let me ask you, of course, I mean, if you have been there, you must know, of course, that Ireland is divided into two sections. You have Northern Ireland in the north, and you have the rest of Ireland, right?
Yes,
So where were you? Were you in the north or in the rest of Ireland?
in the rest of the island because in the
Okay. Dublin, were you in Dublin, for example?
2 years in the Dublin, after that
Mm.
in Galway and
Mm.
and Limerick, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm happy that you enjoyed yourself over there, and those guys left very good impressions
Yeah.
on you. Yeah. Are they relatable in any way? You feel that you were talking to people that you know, they are not perhaps as cold as the other nationalities. What do you think of the Irish?
Very
Because
kind, kindful, very
very
kind.
kind, yes.
Yes, and peaceful is they and helpful. Everything is helpful with us and with my children. Very nice.
Interesting. So have you had the chance to go and live in Britain, in England, for example, or in the other parts of? Yeah, the reason why I'm asking, we were trying to kind of set Ireland against the other parts of Britain. Have you had this chance?
We visit, yes, some area, yes. Limerick and what do you call it, another one. A lot of area, and their area is about uh,
Mumtaz. Thank you so much, Nida.
Titanic.
What's your full name, by the way?
Titanic, I
Because
think.
we
Yeah.
have so many Nidas in the class. Which Nida are you?
Nida Usman, Jamia.
Nida Osman. Okay. Okay, Nida. Thank you so much. Okay. So see, again, if you have looked closely at the map, you're going to find that Britain is to the east of Ireland, I guess, I gather, and Ireland is to the west. Like I said, it is divided. I'm talking about Ireland in general. It's divided into 32 counties. Counties are like governorates or provinces, and 6 of them are in the north, and they now form what we call Northern Ireland, and they are affiliated to the British. They are up until this moment, they are affiliated, and they have their loyalties with the British, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The rest of Ireland, I mean, the parts that are not that north are Catholic and are the majority, and they are formed, or they have formed their own independent state as well. Whenever we talk about Ireland, we talk about polarities, we talk about binaries. You always have two things. You have two opposites. You have the Catholics and you have the Anglicans or the Protestants. You have the North and you have the rest of Ireland. You have the Republicans and you have the Unionists. So people normally think of Ireland in those binary terms. It's something and the other. I mean, it's something and its opposite. Let's talk about again, Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland. So like I said, Northern Ireland, which is now a country that has a very special status, is affiliated to the English or to the British, and it's made up of 6 counties. In terms of, all of them, of course, are Christian, but within Christianity, you have so many denominations and sections. So Northern Ireland and the people in the north are Anglican or Protestant. The rest of Ireland are all Catholic. If we talk about Northern Ireland and the inhabitants of Northern Ireland, we talk about Unionists. We call them Unionists because they have always been in favor of having union with Britain. They never thought of having their own, of Ireland having its independence. So that's why we call them Unionists. So Unionists because they they have always wanted to be united with Britain. The rest of Ireland, the majority, in other words, are what we call Republicans. Republicans because they wanted to have their own independent republic. They don't even, or they didn't even want to have a monarchy. They could have had their independence and they would have followed the same system of government of Britain, which is having a monarch or a king or a queen. They said, no, we're going to have our independence of Britain. This is one. And even our system of government is not going to be this monarchy system where you have a sitting king or a queen. No, we need to have elected government. We need to have an elected president who comes and goes. I mean, he or she stays in office for 4 or 6 years, and then he gets elected, or somebody else gets elected. So that's why we call them the Republicans. Okay, so the whole idea would be that we will have this conflict between the British rule and the Irish, who decide that they cannot take it any longer. Enough is enough. We've been under British occupation for hundreds of years, and we're not benefiting, obviously. So the first step would be for us to ask for self-government or self-rule, where we can rule ourselves under British, the larger British rule, British Empire. Even that was not granted. So they took it to the next. The Irish took it to the next level. If you're denying us our basic rights, the basic right of self-government, we're going to take it to extremes and we'll ask for complete independence away from you as occupying, country. We're going to ask for complete independence, and we'll get it in 1921. Again, we're starting the chapter with a very historical landmark in the history of Ireland, which is the events of Easter 1916. Of course, Easter is a Christian occasion where people, they kindly mark the occasion by engaging in certain rituals. They feel happy and everything. So this was 1916 when some Irish decided to declare independence, to first of all occupy a place which is the General Post Office in a place called Sackville, and from there they declared that Ireland is no longer part of Britain, and they declared a provisional government, a temporary government, until they have a stable or a permanent government. They declared that they are now a republic. What would be the reaction of the British? Of course, the British are not going to stay silent or passive. They are going to react by fighting back, by attacking these people, and it's going to be a big massacre where hundreds of people get killed and get wounded. Okay, so we're talking about 1916 during Easter and the revolution, if you can call it a revolution or uprising or even rising. Let me just read part of the proclamation that they made. So we're talking about rebels, we're talking about revolutionaries who normally have a declaration to make. So they were calling on the Irish when they took over the the General Post Office. They said, this is in their own words, Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she received her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. This was their declaration. Declaration, when you declare something, you say, no, so we're no longer part of Britain, we are declaring our own independence. So when you look at how the declaration was phrased, it can tell you a great deal about Ireland and its tradition and how the Irish think of themselves. Major things we have in this small quotation. So again, it's addressed to the Irish people, whether they are men and women, and it's in the name of God. So in the name of God, when you start with in the name of God, this can tell you a great deal about the Irish nation and how religious they are. The fact that they were very religious, and religion meant a great deal. So there is no better way to appeal to them than to address their religious instincts and their religious feelings. So again, it's not religion only, also the dead generations. Okay, so this is a reference to their ancestors, their tradition. So the revolutionaries are appealing to the Irish through talking about God and religion, and also talking about tradition and their old, old ancestors. And they are asking them to do what? To kind of join them so that they can have their freedom. Again, what happened? That all took 6 days. Fighting and fighting back, and the end result would be that central Dublin got destroyed, and we had long lists of casualties, whether those casualties were people who got killed or wounded. There was a great deal of looting and disruption. When you look at the numbers and the statistics, the deaths of 132 soldiers and policemen, 318 civilians and 64 rebels, and 397 soldiers and policemen. Look at the numbers. Obviously, it was a big thing. And like I said, Ireland after 1916 is not the Ireland that the British have known. It's totally different. People would ask for more than just self-rule. They would ask for complete independence and everything, and they will get it, like I said. I'd like a part of our project would be to be also alert and able to distinguish between when you see bias, when you see somebody having views that would take you to certain directions that you wouldn't normally take. If you look at the wording of the chapter, if you look at how the writer is presenting this part, look at it. He's saying, he or she, I don't know, after 6 days fighting, the wrecking of much of central Dublin, looting and disruption. This is said and written from the perspective of obviously an English writer, saying that there were there was a lot of looting. Looting, when there is looting, people go and steal from shops and all these kinds of things. And the death of 132 soldiers and policemen. So this, okay, these soldiers and policemen work for whom? Work for the Irish people or work for the British government? I'm asking you. We're talking about the statistics and how the statistics are presented. How did the writer start? He started with the soldiers and policemen. He didn't start with the civilians. Can you see that? Hello.
They started addressing the soldiers who were fighting for the Ireland people.
Yeah, okay. So the soldiers and policemen are normally under the jurisdiction and under the control of the British occupier. The writer is starting with them. He's not starting with the civilians, the Irish civilians. If this would tell you something, it would tell you how biased he is. He cannot help it. He could have started with the big number, 318 civilians, Irish civilians, but he decided to start with the soldiers and policemen. He's trying to tell you that perhaps he's trying to paint an ugly image of what happened. Okay, so again, 397 soldiers and policemen, and then 2,217 wounded. It's the same thing. It's a pattern that gets repeated. He does not start with the civilians, the Irish civilians. He starts with the forces of the government, which is obviously under the British occupation or the British occupation itself. Okay? So again, he talks about, people who were part of the revolution as rebels. You know what a rebel is?
Yes, like an outlaw people. They don't follow the laws.
Yeah. Rebels are, it has negative connotations and negative meaning. So to say that these people were rebels, they were not revolutionary, it means that he's trying to say that they just came out for no reasons. Is that so? Of course, they were reacting to a long tradition of oppression, a long tradition of abuse upon the part of the English. They don't just wake up and decide to revolt and destroy things. No, they have been keeping it within themselves. They asked for some of their rights, and they were not given those rights. So the next thing you know is that they are revolting. Okay, so he doesn't say that those guys are revolutionaries. He is saying that they are rebels, mutamarridin. Okay, so if I say that they are rebels, it means that they deserve to be killed, to be wounded. See how the writer is playing with the words, and this is something that we need to learn. We need to be able to make this distinction between facts and opinions. And obviously here, this part is very opinionated. It's full of opinions, and of course, being an English writer, the writer is, blaming the Irish for everything. See, and he doesn't even refer to what happened as revolution, for example. He says, at one point, he says that this is a rising. And at another, he would say this is a rebellion or a war of independence. You see? So why don't you say that this is a war of independence? Why would you use the word rebellion? So rebellion would give you a negative meaning. He didn't say that it is a revolution. Of course, you know the difference between a revolution and a rebellion, right? Rebellion can be unwarranted, can also be, it's always negative. People who are not happy for no obvious reason. But if you say that we had a revolution, it means that people had legitimate concerns. I mean, they wanted things to happen with them. They wanted perhaps better living conditions, but they didn't get that. So they started a revolution. Again, he's referring to them as rebels. Okay, so like I said, the Easter Rising, or what happened during Easter, was the culmination of demands for self-rule. So the Irish wanted self-rule. They wanted to rule themselves under a British occupation, and they were fine with that since the late 18th century. But the English and the British wouldn't, grant them that. So the next thing is that they revolt. So they wanted self-rule, and they were denied that. And they were also not happy with how the British ruled Ireland. They were very oppressive. Oppressive means that they didn't give them any rights. They were jailing them. They wouldn't tolerate, freedom of expression. And also the fact that they were prizing the Anglo-Irish in the north. Remember when we spoke about Northern Ireland, those 6 counties that we have in the north, those 6 counties were made up of, Irish people and also people who came from, Britain, and they settled in this area for hundreds of years. And they came to be known as Anglo-Irish. So those Anglo-Irish people in the north were given all the privileges and all the advantages at the expense of the rest of the Irish. So it's only natural that the Irish are going to compare what happens with them with what happens with the Anglo-Irish, and the fact that the Anglo-Irish had the lands and the rest of the Irish people are working in those lands for very little. So again, this was one of the reasons why the Irish would eventually revolt against the English. Again, you had a number of incidents where the Irish are trying to say enough is enough. Again, if they are denied self-rule, they would take it to the next level and ask for having their own republic, their own state, independent state, and they would also say that we don't want a hereditary monarch. We don't want a king or a queen. We need to have a republic. Again, in 1922, 26 of Ireland's 32 counties became state independent of Britain. This is the rest of Ireland that we talk about, Again, who was responsible for this movement towards independence? It was a group of people that we normally refer to as Republicans or Nationalists. Nationalists means that they believe in their country, they believe that in the history of their country, they believe that their country should have, better government, should have its own government away from the British. In order to do that, they would restore people's confidence in Irish traditions. They would ask poets and literary figures to depend on Irish mythology in their works of art. They would also do research on Irish history in order to dig and unearth those cultural treasures that Ireland had. So again, if you're a nationalist and you have a nationalist cause, you need to have support from the people. The people are normally they don't normally engage in fights, and they wouldn't even accept it sometimes. Even they were put at a disadvantage by the British. They were, I mean, living with it, settling with it. They never wanted to revolt or do anything out of the extraordinary. So when the nationalists came, they said, we need the support of the people. So how can you secure the support? You talk to them about national pride, the fact that their history is as good as that of the British. Why settle for um, um, for less when you can have your own independent country and all these kinds of things. So as you can see, this is Ireland during Easter when the events happened. Look at how the events are. Look at the caption. The caption says what, Jemma? Says Irish rebellion. Okay, rebellion has negative connotations and negative associations. When you say rebellion, it means that the Irish were doing something wrong, which is of course not correct. Look at the choice of words in the map. Irish rebellion. He didn't say Irish uprising. He didn't say Irish revolution. He didn't even say Irish rising. Are you getting the idea?
Yes, because they're using this photo and like there's the other line that describes Victor in the Empirical War Museum in London. That's why they so biased towards their country.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. What I'm trying to tell everybody is that you need not to take what other people are saying for granted. You need to challenge what other people. This is said and this is written from the perspective of obviously an Anglo writer, English writer, not Irish, because of how he is using words and how he is even giving illustration that would reinforce the point that he has. The point that he has is that the Irish do not or did not have a good cause, and that the Irish messed with their history and they tweaked their history a little bit so that they can have a glorious history that other people would be proud of. And the next thing you know is that they also would ask for independence. So you can almost tell that this guy is very biased. Okay. Again, we spoke about this rift that we now have between Northern Ireland, where the six counties are in the north, and they are for the most part Anglo-Irish, and they are Protestant, and the rest of Ireland, where you have 26 other counties are for the most part Catholic, and they are very conservative, and they are also Republican. Republican means that they want complete independence. Again, the 26 counties that we're talking about are Catholic, and the Catholic Church had such a huge hold on people. I mean, people were Catholics are normally very religious and very devout. And this is what the nationalist movement is going to also exploit and play on. They are going to also address those fervent religious feelings of the Irish. So again, the Easter Rising is a focal point. You see how, you see the fluctuations of the writer. Sometimes he says rebellion, Easter rebellion. And some other times he would say uprising. And here he is saying rising. So, but he never says it's a revolution, as you can see, right? The writer here has two issues. He has an issue with the nationalists when it comes to the past, and also when it comes to the future after they had their own independent state and they became the government. He says in the past the nationalists would tamper with and would tweak history and tradition so that they can beautify history in the eyes of the ordinary Irish, so that the ordinary Irish would join them. This is in the past. And he says, even after they got their independence in 1922, this idea of nationalism would also inform their policies. Their policies were all meant to divide, not to unite people. For example, if they are allocating money for the restoration of all buildings, they would look whether the building is purely Irish or Anglo-Irish. If it has anything to do with the British occupation, they would leave it until it decay and until it it vanishes. But if it's something related to the Irish history, they would restore it and they would invest heavily on it. So this is one of the things that he takes against the Irish when they get their independence. So history and tradition, everyone. And the writer is prefacing this part by talking about history and how history, in his opinion, is a maze of opinion. A maze means, you know what a maze is, a labyrinth, or labyrinth or maze would give you the sense of confusion and complications and things getting entangled with each other. So according to him, history is mere opinion, contradiction and hearsay. Hearsay means that you never check whether what is being said is correct, accurate or not. So again, he is reducing history to mere opinion, to mere contradiction and hearsay. Why is he doing that? Because he's going to talk about Irish history and what the nationalists are going to do in order to restore their history. So when he gives you his opinion about history and says that it's mere opinion, it's full of contradictions, you would cast doubt on the history of the Irish, and you would say that perhaps this history is fabricated. Those sets of traditions were never there. They had to invent them so that they can push forward their agenda of independence.
Can I say something about history?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so that topic about the objectivity of history and who's telling it, has been like a huge subject of debate for a long time. And actually, I don't really see it as a wrong thing, because if we literally just forgot and just ignore and being so neglected of all the factors that a certain nation has went through to make an impact or to make a movement like the revolutionary, the أيوة اللي هي الثورة الهندية. That wouldn't actually be fair to their case. Just looking in their in a kind of subjective point of view, or like as you said, a white Anglo man of point of view is not really making the case any fair or any justice.
Yeah. So this is basically what, again, our main concern would be that whether we're talking about history or any other thing for that matter, people need not to subscribe to what other people are saying. They have to fact check things first. they have to challenge the ideas and see whether these ideas are correct or wrong. You need to always be on the lookout about this confusion between facts and opinions. Sometimes a writer may masquerade or disguise his opinion so that they would appear to us as facts. So, and this is what we are trying to avoid here. So this is an excellent example of a biased English writer who is trying to do his best to, to discredit the Irish, to belittle their history and their tradition. In order to do that, he would, again, biased as he is, having a biased agenda, in order to do that, to make you believe that the Irish invented their own tradition and those sets of tradition never existed. They invented their own history and those historical events never happened. In order to do that, he would use the work of a very famous historian by the name of Eric Hobson, such a tongue twister. And this guy is talking about that in some cultures we have this invention of tradition as a unifying tool or element. You're trying to bring a country together. It is made up of different people, diverse. Let's look at the United States of America, for example, where their history is not that long, but they hold their history in such a great esteem, so that because it's a unifying force, it unites people who come from the Middle East with people who come from Europe, people who come from the Indian subcontinent. So those people all live together in the United States, and the government want to unify them. So how can it unify them? It starts to talk about the history of the United States, the framers, the founding fathers, the fact that they wrote the constitutions in such a way so that they can guarantee the rights. So when you look at it, if you compare the history of the United States to the history of a country like India, for example, or Iraq or Egypt, I mean, their history would pale in comparison, but they are making such a huge deal out of it so that they can unify people. So inventing history and talking too much about history that do not exist or does not exist is not a bad thing sometimes. Sometimes it has benign and noble purposes. But this is not what the writer of the chapter is doing here. He's not giving the Irish the benefit of the doubt. He's trying to say that they have invented and fabricated their tradition so that they can serve their cause. What is their cause? Their cause would be to eventually have independence away from Britain. Okay, so what do people normally those who think about history and how unifying it can be, however short it is, they normally talk about, like I said, they talk about founding fathers. They give you, they have their anthems and their emblems that would show their culture. And we have the example of the Americans when we have big ideas like Uncle Sam, when they have their own anthem that glorify independence and individuality, the country of the free, and I don't know what. And then they have their own cultural emblems. Well, that can be a certain hat, it can be certain sports, it can be even hamburgers and McDonald's and all these kinds of things. So again, he's trying to say that many things we take for granted about the past may not be quite what they seem. And he's also giving us the example of the Open University and how relatively short its history is. It was established in 1969, but whenever people graduate, they would dwell on the tradition of robe wearing, when you normally have gowns that belong to other universities with very long history like Oxford and Cambridge. So the Open University itself is using emblems from the past, and is using sets of traditions from the past so that it can perhaps advertise itself. And so what is it that the Irish nationalists depended on in order to kind of raise awareness about Ireland and its history and culture? So they drew on a set of symbols like harps, round towers, wolf hounds. These are all, artifacts or things taken from the Irish culture. They would exaggerate them. They would make them, available for people, so that people can take pride in them. So that when we ask them to join our cause calling for independence, they would agree. So they drew on a set of symbols, like I said, that represented an ancient and purely Irish past. So this was the focus. The Irish nationalists would focus on whatever is Irish, is uniquely Irish and originally Irish, away from the culture of the English and the Scotch settlers who came to Ireland since the 12th century. Again, the end result and the eventual goal would be for them to have their Irish state, free Irish state. Do you have any questions?
Doctor, I don't have a question, but I have something just I want to add.
Yeah, Adi.
Firstly, my name is Bashar Abdullah.
Yeah,
And
Bashar.
I found the writer, like the media in these days, that's presenting the Native American and the Irish, the islands, and also the Palestinians people like they are terrorists or rebels. But there was not. Do you got me? I don't know how I explain it for you.
Can you, you say it in Arabic يا بشار, no problem.
يعني زي لما مثلا بيمثل السكان الأصليين للأرض كأنه هم الإرهاب أو كأنه هم المتمردين، لكن في الحقيقة هم لا، والدخل زي مثلا الأوروبيين أول ما دخلوا على أمريكا.
Yes. Yeah.
كأنه هم الفيكتيم، يعني كأنه هم الضحايا.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, this is what you felt reading the chapter, or this is a very a general impression here?
General impression about the writer.
The writer of the chapter. You have read that? Did you read the chapter?
No, just with you.
Yes. I would have liked to have left it to you to decide for yourselves. But we don't have this luxury. I mean, time is limited. But when you go back to the chapter and to when you look at the wording and the phrasing, you would see how biased the writer is. Again, the whole chapter is about that, about proving or trying to prove that people can tweak history and can tweak tradition so that they can serve certain causes and certain purposes. And this is what, according to the writer, the Irish are doing. The fact that they are doing the tweaking and the changing so that they can, I mean, gain independence eventually. Okay. We'll start with the Irish nationalisms, and actually it's not one nationalism that we have. We normally have people who are national. We call them nationalists, and we know what their agenda is if they are nationalists. It is true that we have nationalists, but those nationalists are, kind of divided into categories. You would have Irish, you have historical nationalists who would focus on history, and you would have cultural nationalists who would focus on culture and literature and all these kinds of things. Again, the eventual goal, whether we're talking about those who check and study and research history, or those who kind of dig into the Irish mythology and literature, they all have the same goal, which is securing the independence of Ireland eventually. So in contemporary Ireland, nationalism survives in two forms, and he believes that those two forms are not compatible with one another. It's always not. It's always negative. In actual fact, they complement each other. You have people who are political, and you have people who are cultural, but they have the same aim. The aim would be for them to gain independence individually. But this is not eventually. But this is obviously not how the writer sees it. He sees that those different forms of nationalism are not compatible. They don't work together. Again, what are they? Like I said, you have the political and you also have the cultural. When he talks about the political, he would talk about the link between the political and the religious, and he would say that the Catholic Church has always played a very major role in that. The fact that people are deeply religious, and the nationalists would depend on that for fuel. They would depend on that for the support of the people. I mean, he talks about the, like I said, the fact that the Irish and the English sat together, and there was this treaty of 1921 where the Irish got their independence. And he talks about the idea that this was not complete independence, because you have 6 of the 32 counties, having a special status. This status is more or less associated with the English or the British. We're talking about Northern Ireland, and he says that from 1922 on, all what I mean, Ireland is thinking, independent Ireland thinking of would be to acquire the 6 other counties. This is what they think of. Again, this is also negative. He says that he is trying to imply that this is their only business, and this is the only thing that they engage themselves in, how to restore the other 6 counties in the north, which is obviously not true. Again, we spoke about different forms of nationalism, and one of them happens to be the political nationalism, where you're trying to secure independence through politics. So what is it that the Irish would do in order to secure independence politically? They would, again, make a number, they would ask, and they would also go on marches, and they would kind of leave nothing untouched to tell the English about their demands, and they would engage in politics by perhaps forming political parties, by trying to get elected in the parliament, and so that their voices can be heard. Of course, they have representation in the British Parliament, but this is a very small, representation. But they would use that in order to leverage to their cause and talk about it. One of the political things that they did, this political activism that they had, would be a campaign for what they called Catholic emancipation. And this was led by a lawyer, an Irish lawyer, by the name of Daniel O'Connell. Again, so what is it that he wanted to do? It's called Catholic emancipation. Emancipation means to emancipate somebody, is to set him free. It means that somebody was jailed, and it doesn't have to be physical jail or prison. You can be jailed in your beliefs, you can be jailed in your opinions and ideas. So there was this kind of imprisonment that people felt. And the Catholics, the majority of the people who are Catholics, were denied lots of the civil rights that the Protestants in the North were enjoying. So there was this campaign, like I told you, in the early 19th century, where they asked for Catholic rights. They wanted to be able, for example, to vote, and along with other rights, and they got that. So the campaign that they launched bore fruit and was very successful, to the extent that the British Parliament would make this act, or this law, which is called Catholic Emancipation Act. And then over time they would be able to be part of the British Parliament, and their number is going to increase until it becomes 100. And when you become 100, so you are a very important, significant number in the Parliament, and then you can make laws, you can change laws. And this is actually what the Irish did. They also had another political campaign to repeal the Act of Union between Britain and Ireland. There was an Act of Parliament in the past, and this was called Act of Union, where Britain and Ireland were referred to as one thing. So thanks to Irish lawmakers in the British Parliament, this act is going to be also revoked. Again, over time, they would have more rights. They would have the British, recognize the fact that the Irish have their own history, and this history should be honored and respected, and artifacts and symbols of this history should be also preserved and restored and thought highly of. Again, we would have all this political, as you can see, very peaceful, until something very monumental happens, and that would change also the dynamics of the struggle, if you like. This was the Irish famine of 1845. You know what a famine is. Famine means that you die of starvation. You don't have access to food, you don't have access to water, and you have this lack of access until you perish or you die. And this was happening with the Irish, and I think it was because of the potato. I think it was the potato crop failure, the fact that they were kind of cultivating and planting potato, and it got all when something bad happens to plants and crops, and they are no longer usable, you cannot use them. So this was happening. There was this great Irish famine where thousands of people died, and other thousands had to flee the country seeking better living conditions. So in 1845, the first signs of potato blight heralded a famine that lasted for some 6 years and led to the death or immigration to the USA, Canada, Australia, and other parts of the British Empire. So we're talking about 1 million Irish individuals, men and women. We're talking about people who felt very bad about the whole catastrophe. And like I said, so the famine and what happened and was very transformational. Before the famine, people were asking for self-government. They wanted to have self-rule within the British Empire. But when they saw what happened with them, and the fact that they were reduced to very poor straits, and the fact that they, hundreds and thousands of them died as a result of poverty and famine, they decided that no, it's not working anymore. It's not self-government that we want now. No, not anymore. We want complete and total independence. Of course, from that time on, people started to engage in protests, and that would encourage them even to rethink the relationship between the landowners and those who work in the land. And they also spoke to their elected members of government, and they would say that we need to reconsider this relationship between those who own the land, the Anglo-Irish for the most part, and the rest of the Irish. And that helped a great deal, because because of this compensation, there was undeclared war, and it's called the Land War of 1879 and 80, where people started to fight for their land rights. They would talk to their land lords. They would talk to people who own the land, who are Anglo-Irish, and they would demand that they reduce the rent and other things. And it's going to take years and years until there is going to be very sweeping land reforms, where it would at one point reach the extent that there is going to be a Land Act. This was in 1909, where the land lords and those who have the land, and the Anglo-Irish, were asked to kind of sell their lands to the rest of the people. Actually, they were encouraged by even the British government to do so. But this is coming a long way, as you can see. So as you can see, British landlordism had been eradicated, and we started to have some communal land holding and egalitarian agricultural practices. And then we move to the idea of cultural nationalism. Of course, the phrase can be very suggestive, and it can tell you a great deal. So again, it's nationalism, and our ultimate goal would be to have independence. But this time around, it's not through politics that we're seeking independence. We're seeking independence, and we're trying to secure independence through culture. And of course, when we talk about culture, we talk about museums, we talk about history, we talk about even literature. I think we should stop and continue tomorrow. The chapter is a little bit long, and it's full of ideas. And so can we stop on this note and have, like we agreed, we will have another class tomorrow at 2 o'clock. So tomorrow we will finish the rest of the chapter. In the meantime, I would like you to read what we have done together. I would like you to look and see whether what I said about the writer is correct. You may have a different opinion. Perhaps I am too judgmental. Perhaps I'm not giving him or them the benefit of the doubt. I would like you to read, to go over what we have finished so far, and perhaps carry it a little bit further by reading until the end of the chapter. Can we do that? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so we're meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Inshallah, tomorrow is Tuesday. And until then, I wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum.